Joining us this morning is the author of a book called The World According to Star Wars. And I really want to find out a lot more about this book and how this came to be. Cass Sunstein joins us this morning to tell us more about it. Good morning, Cass. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great.
Okay, now how does a university professor from Harvard who has been in the White House before as administrator of the White House Office on Information and Regulatory Affairs write a book about Star Wars?
Well, the origin is I have a boy who was then 5 years old. He's now 7, and he got obsessed with the saga, and that made me think, how did George Lucas come up with this stuff? Why has this made over $30 billion? Why does it appeal to so many people, whether they're 5 years old or 80 years old? What does this say about the saga and about our country?
But you write this book, and it's in a humorous way, also revealing way, and I do like some of the behind the scenes stuff. I didn't know that much about the origins, what Lucas put into it, and how much he was stealing from a Japanese work, right?
Absolutely. So what I think is part of his genius is that he took an old Japanese movie, and he took Flash Gordon, the old serial, and he took some comic books, and he kept the kind of shallowness and sense of fun of all those and the silliness, but he also gave it a kind of depth about freedom of choice, fathers and sons, and also the vulnerability of governments.
But you take this off. You take this off into other far away planets in your analysis of this.
Well, I do. I hope it's faithful to the reason the stuff connects so much. So the latest movie, The Force Awakens, has been the most successful in sheer dollars of any movie in North American history. That's really saying something. A New Hope, which was the first one released, which people thought was going to tank. The studio had no faith in it. They didn't make enough celluloid, actually, to stock it in the movie theaters. And that one, except for Gone with the Wind, that was one in real dollars was the most successful movie of all time. So,
well, Lucas went on vacation, didn't he? I think he during the premiere. Wasn't even around.
I went to Hawaii, partly because Hawaii is really nice, but partly because you might not want to be in the mainland when the movie you've worked on for years tanks.
But it did not, obviously. However, I do want to know, one of the inside stories is, why do we start with episode 4?
I think the reason he did that is that he had a vision of a princess who was also a rebel, a sense of a boy, Luke, who was going to go on a journey. And we now call it Episode 4, and many people, including Lucas, say that was the plan all along. I don't believe it. I think the idea of starting something really cool in midstream was what fired up his imagination. It eventually became Episode 4, as he did the other ones, but I don't think he had it figured out from the beginning.
All right. And again, George Sunstein joining us. Cass Sunstein joining us to talk about this book, The World According to Star Wars. But George Lucas well, what did he do? I mean, he wasn't even thinking that he was going to have to follow this up at first, right?
Well, he had a lot of ideas. This is a font of creativity, this guy. If you have a movie that the studio didn't applaud when they saw the rough cut, and in fact nobody even smiled, and if you have a bunch of people in the studio saying, you know what, this is crazy, if your own actors think, as Harrison Ford did, that this has no hope, so to speak, this is a movie that has a big guy walking around in a dog outfit, Chewbacca now. So if you have all that kind of negativity coming at you, the idea that you'd follow it up with a blockbuster, let alone have a 6, 7, 9 movie saga, you'd have to be pretty arrogant to think that. So I think he had a lot of ideas, but it took the spectacular success of what we now call Episode 4 to get him to put them on paper.
You talk about your 4- and 5-year-old being obsessed with it, but this has been a multi-generational movie from the very beginning. I remember going. I was a science fiction fan anyway, and I went to see it in the first movie, and then when the second movie was getting ready to come out, I had a 4-year-old neighbor who was obsessed with the movie, and I took him to see it so he could do a review on the radio for me.
That's amazing. That's the kind of thing that happened all over the United States and to some extent the world. So one thing I discovered when I was writing this book is that if I was talking to someone from Canada or even Russia, I mentioned Star Wars, their face would soften, and they could be 60 years old, 70 years old. They'd look 12 years old all of a sudden, and they'd have a tail. Sometimes it's parents who had sick children. I've heard lots of stories about that, who took their sick child to Star Wars. Sometimes it's kids who've lost their parents, and their parents took them to Star Wars. So one thing it does do, really, and we have national holidays for this, but not a whole lot of things, is it connects people with their grandchildren, sometimes their grandparents,
right.
And it connects people. You can live in Alaska or Hawaii or Copenhagen or New York or Alabama or San Francisco, and Star Wars, you're immediately with each other talking about shared memories. And in a country that's split by many things these days, there's some racial issues in the United States we've all noticed. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. It does seem to cross lots of boundaries for us. And when The Force Awakens was getting ready to come out, I was excited about that. I was not particularly excited by the prequels. I saw them, but I wasn't particularly engrossed by them. But this one's something else. I think we talked about it because there's a big age difference between Mandy and I, and I talked about how it appeals across so many. I want to go because I remember the first couple of movies, first three, and I want to go for that reason. And she wants to go because she right? You like how it has progressed.
Where absolutely. It's as the old movies. My family watched it when we were little, anyways, and now it's nice to see it on the big screen again.
Absolutely. So there's some genius, I think, in The Force Awakens that if you have fond memories of the original trilogy, well, you got the main characters right there. And if you have, a sense that this is ancient history and you're not so interested in the old movies, well, it's still kind of a firecracker, this one. It really moves. So you can like it for lots of different reasons, and probably millions of people have gotten newly interested in the original movies just because this one makes them think, hey, what's going on here?
Yes, and I think it's just today the actor who's going to play the young Han Solo is announced.
Completely.
Yeah.
And he's got a big burden and a fast-moving spaceship on his shoulders.
Yeah, it does indeed. Again, The World According to Star Wars by Cass Sunstein. And Cass, thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. A pleasure.
It's Coastal Daybreak here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240.